It's 9:02. We'll call a meeting of the Texas Real Estate Commission on November the 18th, 2014 to order and ask Commissioner Hensley to lead us into pledges of allegiance. Please rise.
Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Texas flag.
Honor the Texas flag. I pledge allegiance to thee, Texas, one state under God, one and indivisible.
You may be seated. We will soon have some open seats on the Texas Real Estate Inspector Advisory Committee, and I have asked Commissioners Jones and Turner, and we will be asking Inspectors Cecil Brooks and Fred Buck to seat the committee that will interview the candidates and make a recommendation to this commission. I have talked to the commissioners and they have said yes. I have not yet spoken to the other two. We also will seat a subcommittee of Commissioners Justice, Hensley, and Arriaga to interview and review appointments to the Education Standards Advisory Committee and make a recommendation to the full commission. Now I ask for reports from Administrator. I skip one. Oh, is somebody not here? Thank you. Oh, Commissioner Martinez. I would seek the approval of his...
Leader and Mr. Alley.
Oh, Alley. Okay. Somebody want to make a motion on that?
Madam Chair, move that Commissioner Martinez and Commissioner Alley are excused from this meeting.
Second.
All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. Motion carries. We have excused that. Now we would look for reports. Mr. Olmix, and I expect you're first, and thank you for keeping me straight.
Thank you and good morning.
There we are. Good morning and welcome to all of the commissioners, and thank you for your continued service to Texas. Thank you also for the productive workshop session you engaged in yesterday afternoon. Your team understands your priorities, and we will continue to carry them forward in serving the people of Texas. We've had a busy fall season, and your agenda today reflects this. You'll hear reports from the Executive Committee, the Education Standards Advisory Committee, the Broker Responsibility Working Group, and the Inspector Advisory Committee, all of which had one or more meetings since your last regular commission meeting in August. Training is underway for instructors of the 2015-16 Broker Responsibility course, which has received very positive reviews from participants. Several instructors have remarked to me that this is the best course yet produced by the Commission's writing group to date, including all prior versions of the Legal and Ethics Update course. So our gratitude goes out to those volunteers who gave their time and talent to this fine effort. You'll also be completing the adoption of the last set of rules to complete our quadrennial rule review process, a long but vitally important process that we undergo every 4 years to ensure that our rules remain relevant. You'll hear a report on the state auditor's extended visit with the agency and the clarifications to the reporting guidance, which we have implemented. This item was withdrawn from reporting in August, you may recall, for reconsideration due to some of the unique features of an SDSI agency, of which TREC is the most complex of those 8 agencies. Several items are up for discussion. 3 proposals to clarify requirements for designated brokers of business entities, funded reserve provisions for residential service companies, and inspector practical education options. These discussions are fully in keeping with the Commission's charge to protect the consumers of real estate services in Texas by ensuring qualified and ethical service providers. I'm also pleased to let you know that we have added a new director position in the Information Technology Services Department. Tom will remain as the deputy director, and Steve Spiropoulos will join us on December 8th to direct the critical projects we have underway to fully exploit the potential of our Versa regulation database. And lastly, on behalf of your staff team here at the Commission, we wish each of you a wonderful Thanksgiving Day and a blessed and peace-filled holiday season. May the new year bring us all more happiness and success. Unless you have any questions for me, the directors will now provide reports on the fiscal year-end statistics for their divisions, as well as their regular quarterly update reports.
Any questions? Any questions for Mr. Olmixon?
Thank you.
Thank you. As you're on your way up, Ms. Deanda, I would just tell the rest of the commission that we're going to move agenda item 24 up between agenda items 10 and 11 so that the state auditors folks can go back to work or begin Christmas shopping, whatever is appropriate for them.
Ready?
Yes, ma'am.
Well, good morning. Lori Deanda, Director of Reception and Communication Services. Before I refer you to the C1 report, I have two new staff members that I would like to introduce. First, we have Maury James. She joined TREC in September as a customer service representative and has 10 years of customer service experience. Next, we have Samantha Whitcomb. She joined TREC in October as a customer service representative and has over 10 years of customer service experience, and she recently moved back to Austin from Colorado. And we have two part-time positions that I'm currently interviewing for, so I hope to have these positions filled soon. So please refer to the C1 report. The first report is for the month of August, which is the comparison report between fiscal year 2013 and fiscal year 2014. In fiscal year 2014, RCS received 6,761 fewer calls and handled 2,333 fewer walk-ins, but responded to an additional 2,589 emails, which were responded to within 2 business days. The next page is the September report. This month has the numbers for the beginning of fiscal year 2015. We received a total of 16,665 calls, assisted 397 walk-ins, and responded to 5,413 emails. Does anyone have any questions?
Any questions for Ms. Deanda?
Okay, thank you.
Hearing none, thank you. Is Ms. Jackson?
Good morning.
Morning.
Gwen Jackson, Director of Education and Licensing Services. First of all, I'd like to announce that Margarita White, who has been the education manager for the ELS division since 2007. However, she's been a TREC and TLCB employee for over 30 years. She will be retiring this Thursday, which is November the 20th, and she's here. This will be her last commission meeting that she'll be attending. And while her last day is Thursday, we'll be having a retirement celebration for her on Tuesday, November the 25th. So if you're in the area on that day, please plan to stop by at 3:30 to wish her well. We're going to miss her. We currently have 2 vacancies posted. One of those vacancies is for an Education Specialist 2 position, and one is for Margarita's Manager 2 position. These vacancies and position requirements are posted at the TREC website for anyone who's interested and qualified to apply. Now, if you would refer to the August L1 report, this report provides the fiscal year in comparison of the number of applications received, licenses issued from those applications, and our renewal activity. Important to note is that our total original applications from 2013 were 14,016. We ended this fiscal year with 21,056, which is an increase of 50% total original applications received. And that's important to note because, as you'll see on additional reports following, that there'll be a trend for there to be more sales agents. Total licenses issued from original applications, 18,456 in 2013 and 19,104 ending fiscal year 2014. Total renewals, 56,180, which is about 84% of those individuals who were sent renewal notices. 84% of them renewed their licenses. If there are no questions, I'll move to the next L1 report, which is the report strictly for the month of September, so you can see how we began this fiscal year. 1,592 total original applications, 1,495 in 2013, so we see about a 6.5% increase showing for the month of September. We see that total renewals from brokers and sales were at 4,639, indicating that 86% of those who were sent renewal notices did renew their licenses. If there are no questions for that report, we'll move on to the L2. And this is where you will see an upward trend in terms of the total number of licenses and registrants that we currently have. In 2013, we had a total of 147,977. The end of August, or the beginning of September, we had 156,158. So there's that upward trend that you're seeing. That's more significant in terms of total sales. 2013, 97,948. This September, 106,410. So that's about a 10% increase in sales licenses. And we have a total of brokers and sales now are at 151,070. as opposed to 142,782 that we had in September of 2013. There are no questions on that report. We'll move on to our examination activity. And the first report you have there is the August report for the year ending in comparison to 2013. And you'll see that the first attempt pass rate was at 56.5% for salesperson, 47.5% for brokers, whereas in 2013, it was 61% for salespersons and 52% for brokers. The next report strictly shows the our September comparisons. And the reason that I included that was because we did change exam vendors this September. Okay. And you'll note that for 2013, salesperson's first attempt pass rate was at 50%. For salespersons, it was 49% for salespersons this September. It was 39% for brokers in 2013, and it's at 50% for brokers in September of 2014. If there are no questions for that report, the next report is one that I duplicated the numbers for the salespersons and brokers. I apologize for that. But this report also provides the inspector pass rates for you. Inspector pass rates, first attempt for September for real estate inspectors was 80%, and it was over 69.5% for inspectors. The next report is the instructor distribution report, or the L4 report, and we currently have a total of 4,893 total approved instructors versus the 4,609 instructors that we had in September of 2013. We currently have 65 inspector-instructors. Those are not reflected on this list. They will be on future reports. And we have 14 ride-along inspector-instructors. Are there any questions?
Are there any questions for Ms. Jackson from any of her reports? No. Nope.
Okay.
Thank you, Ms. Jackson. I believe we have Mr. Moore.
Mark Moore, Standards and Enforcement Services. I've got 5 reports today, but first I want to introduce 2 new employees. I will make them stand. It's Karen Long and Edward Elizondo. Karen comes to us with they're both administrative assistants. They come to us with, Karen comes to us with about 25 years of experience in state government with the Department of Health, and more recently she was a legal secretary for the Texas Attorney General. Really happy to have her. Her first day was yesterday. I gave her the offer on Thursday. So she had no time to change her mind at all and got here very quickly. Wow. So we're happy to have her. The other person you probably recognize, that's Edward. He's been with the agency 4 years with Reception and Communication Services. Before that, he was with Delph, I think for about 10 years in hospitality industry, which is probably why he's so good with people. He replaced Nancy Grassel. So Edward has assured me he'll stay at least 36 more years with us
good.
So that he will get close to what Nancy had. So
Good.
Thank you.
Thank you.
On the reports, we have 5 reports, which is different from our normal 3, because we have 2 end of fiscal year reports. So this gives us the opportunity to look at the past year and see how we did. Pretty much we had a good year, and I'm happy with these. I'm never really satisfied, but I'm happy with it. If you look at the upper right of this report, year to date, you'll see we had 2,262 cases received, and the closed cases was 2,327. So one of our goals was to close more cases than we received. That's not a goal every year because that's impossible, but we did want to achieve that this past year, and so we were happy with that. We have 4 years of this report, so I actually had a lot of data to look at, and these are by far the highest number of openings, I think 1 to 300 more than the past fiscal years, and the number of closings is from 100 to 400 more. So we're keeping up with it, and the staff has been really productive, so I'm happy with their performance. Moving on to the next end of fiscal year report, this is as of August 31st. This is the open case aging report, and one of our goals this year was to have 90% or more of the cases less than a year old. We're at 97%. Now I'm thinking we can probably get 95, 94. Certainly 97 is good. You'll also notice that only 19 cases out of, you don't see the raw numbers here, but it's 19 cases out of 620 are over a year old, so that's only about 3%, so that's also, I think, pretty good. The cases I mentioned every report are the 5, we have 5 over 2 years, because those are always of concern, and I'll update you on those. The one over 30 months is actually having an administrative hearing today, so we'll certainly get something out of that. Of the other 4 over 2 years, 2 of them have already closed. One you will also hear today on final order, the Gilbert Quinones case, and then the other case, we're going to do an advisory letter tomorrow. We've already drafted it. We're just holding it for the commission meeting because we're going to advise them on one of the rules that will likely be adopted today or possibly be adopted today. So any questions on either of the end of fiscal year reports? Okay. I won't have much to add on the next 2 since they're only a month of data, but you can see on this one, on the case status, you still have a huge number of openings, or a large number of openings, and a large number of closings. So we're being productive, but the cases are certainly coming in. And actually the next month, October, which didn't make this data, was 239. So we have a lot of cases coming in. On the case aging report, really nothing to add on that. So I'll move to the complaint subject category report. This one we don't have an end of fiscal year report because we have a running year of data. And I think the next report might even do 13 months of data so we can actually compare 1 month of one year to 1 month of another year like we do on some of the other reports. Any questions on any of the reports?
Any questions from?
I just have a comment. You know, this report of the open case aging, the difference in that over the years that I've been here is amazing. You've done a spectacular job. The ink used to be flowing on the right side, and I want to commend your group for all your work in that area.
Indeed.
And the comment I made internally, and I'll make it here too, is most of this was done by Carrie Lewis, so I'm a midget standing on the shoulders of a giant, so I can see further than the giant, but we're building on what was done before, so that she had a lot to do with that. So I inherited it, it was already in pretty good shape, so we're trying to build on that, so thank you. Any other questions or nice comments? Okay. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Moore. Mr. Watson?
Good morning. I'm Tom Watson, Director of Information Technology Services. If you could turn to page I-1, and that's actually page 26 in your packet. The first report is a year-over-year between fiscal years 13 and 14, and we saw real good results in terms of all the major categories. For the web activity, the website actual page counts were down about 2%, so relatively flat, but the actual unique visitors were up pretty strongly for the fiscal year. So we're actually seeing new participants using our website. For the online applications, renewals, and sponsorship transactions, all of those for the past fiscal year were strong compared to prior year. In particular, the initial applications had a real good jump on the utilization rates. So very pleased with those numbers. On page 27, for the month of September, again on the website statistics, we saw good utilization for the website as well as for unique visitors on the usage of the website. The online transactions were relatively strong, again continuing the pattern from last fiscal year, and renewals were strong but flat compared to the same time last year. And then finally on page 28 is a more of a trend representation of the utilization rates for the online services. Pretty much reflects what I have just mentioned.
Thank you.
So with that, I'll be happy to answer any questions you might have.
Any questions for Mr. Watson? Thank you.
Thank you.
I'm sure someone writing notes has noticed that Commissioner Martinez is here. Okay, thank you. I noticed. Ms. Huerta.
Good morning. I'm Melissa Huerta, and I'm Director of Staff and Support Services. And the first report that you have before you is the S1 report, and it's our budget status as of August 31st of 2014. And I made some comments along the right-hand side to help explain the budget variances, but I just wanted to point out a couple of items. The total expenditures for the year were 5.2% less than what we budgeted, and the main budget line items that accounted for the remaining budget balances were other personnel costs, which include costs that we budget for lump sum payments, and we budget for the worst-case scenario, and so not all the retirees who are eligible to retire took advantage of their retirement, so we retained some. Another expense is the professional fees, consumables, travel, maintenance and repair, contracted services, and postage. You'll notice that our revenues were higher for the year than what we projected, and that's mainly due to the increase in our sales applications. And as Gwen pointed out earlier in her L1 report, the sales applications were increased by 59.41% from 2013 to 2014. Any questions on the year-end report? All righty. Our next report is also a budget status report, and this is a budget status report for September. We're pretty much in line with what we're budgeting for expenditures and for revenues. There's a few expense items that are a little bit over, and in the comment sections is the reason for the variance. And does anybody have any questions on September's? September's was pretty easy.
None?
Nope, all righty. So the next report that you have is the S2 report, and this is for August of 2014, and it's the Real Estate Recovery Trust account. And you'll see the first section is our investments, and we went over that in your training yesterday, so you'll get to see the investment reports that we're reporting for you. This is the year end. You can see the year end market value was $646,000. Our cash balance was $135,000 at the end of August. We have monies that are reserved for potential payments within 90 days of $607,255. So our total balance of investments in cash, less the reserved, is $1,433,474.20. Does anybody have any questions on August balances? Okay, so the next report is our September balances, and you can see that we increased a little bit in R&D market value in September. We have $646,206. We have a cash balance of $1.4 million. And so with the reserved of $799,255, that leaves us with a balance of $1,265,535.36 or 30 cents. All right. Does anybody have any questions on this report?
Commissioner Arriaga?
Just a typo maybe, page
Yes, ma'am.
31. Very top, the list of the CDs, bottom two were purchased on May of 2014.
Yes, sir.
There's a difference in interest rate being paid.
A difference in the interest rate. One of them was the par value for $99,700. That one? This?
Yeah, the very end, the second to last column.
Uh-huh.
Accrued interest.
Interest rate of 4.1 versus 0.25.
Oh. Sorry about that. I will look at that report and I'll get the corrected one up for you guys.
Hopefully the top one is incorrect.
Oh, yeah, and I don't think so.
Good catch.
Yes, thank you. So I'll make a note of that report. Okay. The next report, it's going way too fast for me. All right, is the S3 report, and this shows the number of claims we paid out. For 2014 was 13 claims in an amount of $297,028.02. And this is drastically less than what we paid out in fiscal year 13, where we made 18 claims for $904,295.08.
The lowest in a long time.
And the next report is the September.
2005.
So this shows that as of this year, in September, we paid out 2 claims for $15,156.07. So it's looking like there's a trend of the number of payments that we're making per year is decreasing.
Okay.
Anybody have any questions on the S3s?
Any questions?
And the last report is the S4 report, and this is the Real Estate Inspection Recovery Fund account. And so this shows that, as in last year also, we had no claims paid in 2014. So we currently have a balance of investments in cash of less are obligated for 90 days of $606,436.35. That was at the end of August. Any questions on August? All right, so the last report is the same report but for September balances. So we had no claims in September. So for this year, our balance currently at September was $610,192.21, and that's including the reserve for 90 days. And so at the end of the year, anything above $600,000 we will have to pay to the General Revenue Fund. Any questions?
Any questions? Seeing none?
I'm done.
Do you have a question? No.
All right. Thank you.
Thank you. We'll move to agenda item 6, which is a report from the Executive Committee. Executive Committee has met twice since our last meeting, once in September, and the only thing that we talked about that you've not seen on an agenda, or on this agenda, would be a wish list to open up the advertising rule and begin an overhaul of our advertising rule and create a little more clarity in that rule. And as well, we met on October the 31st, and fundamentally, that's the only thing that is not on today's agenda, is to sort of revisit the wish list for the advertising rule and kind of talk about how we might propose that and get involved with. You'll see several things on the agenda today, item 20 and others that were discussed at the executive board meeting on October 31st. I believe that agenda item 7, I guess, are there any questions? Okay. Agenda item 7 is a report by the Education Standards Advisory Committee. I believe the chairman, Susan Jones, is here to make that report.
Good morning. Susan Jones, current chair of the Education Standards Advisory Committee, and we met on September 30th with 11 members present. The committee reviewed public comments that we received concerning the correspondence course delivery, and then we also listened to an in-depth presentation by the TREC education and licensing staff on correspondence courses, and also higher education accreditation body standards, which was very enlightening in helping us come to our next decisions. The committee then had an very in-depth discussion on the comments and the research done by the staff, and we voted to approve all the changes to subchapters F and G except to keep the correspondence courses for the time being as they are, and to change the academic credit references in the proposed Rule 535.66 simply to more closely track with the statutory language that was already in place. Again, with much discussion, the committee voted to form a work group of 5 committee members to study standards for TREC course delivery, in particular correspondence courses, and to invite representatives from colleges and universities and approved TREC providers to provide comments and insights to us at that work group meeting. The desire of the majority of the committee is to see if, with a face-to-face dialogue with stakeholders, we can work towards improving the way in which correspondence courses are currently being delivered, while removing the loopholes and inconsistencies that we are finding in some areas. The feeling of the committee is that all courses must adhere to the required time frame set out in the statutes, and to have better security in determining the student receiving credit is the person who completes all portions of the course. This work group will have its first meeting on December the 2nd here at TREC. Invitations were sent out to 16 stakeholders, along with an agenda that consisted totally of questions for discussion by the group. We expect a good turnout. We've gotten many RSVPs already, and lively discussion. And we also believe that probably we will need a second work group meeting scheduled sometime in early 2015 to continue gathering data and catching some people in our stakeholders that could not come to this December 2nd meeting. And that we will gather that input before the ESAC committee makes a final recommendation on changes to subchapters F and G based on the recommendations received by that work group on correspondence course delivery. In other items, the committee discussed a few revisions to the TREC course and instructor evaluation form, and voted to recommend approval of the revised form, which revisions, I believe, are up in front of you today. The committee discussed possible action regarding qualifying instructor requirements, and asked that staff research this issue and present information back to the committee at our next meeting, which will be held on January the 6th. Our next item for discussion and possible action regarded determination of the examination passage rate for a provider. As currently written, the statute says that the pass-fail rate of students is attached to the provider from whom the student took their last course in the program. Kind of like the pitcher that gets a loss if he comes in the last inning. And so this has been problematic and can cause data to be invalid when determining the actual success or failure of an institution if the student did not take all their courses at that institution. So the committee voted to recommend removing 1101.304C from this statute, which would then allow the commission to make timely changes as needed on this rule, by rule. This should be before the commission today, I believe, as well. Lastly, I would like to make a personal comment. As chair of this committee for the past 2 years, I'd like to say for myself and all those on the committee how honored we are to have been selected to work on this newly created committee at TREC. For each person on the committee, quality education is a passion, not a means of personal gain or accolades. And I have been inspired and humbled in working with all of them thus far. All members exhibit a desire to protect Texas consumers from malpractice by licensees and to ensure that licensees are prepared for the challenges of a constantly changing profession by having the best quality real estate education available. Thank you for allowing us this opportunity. Madam Chair, that concludes my report. Any questions?
Do we have any questions? Commissioner Arriaga and then Commissioner Martinez.
Any responses when we advertised in the Register about the online courses being changed, being done in a classroom style?
No. We are still going to allow online courses. We are just trying to have a little bit more control over how some of the correspondence courses, which are online, are being directed.
I think
Carrie?
Carrie had
Yeah,
something.
just to clarify, from what was originally proposed, the Education Standards Advisory Committee is recommending a change to what you will adopt today. Okay, so
We advertised it, we see any feedback.
we did, and it
Oh,
was
yeah,
based on that feedback that was reviewed at the last ESAC meeting.
Right.
Possible. I'd like to see the feedback. You can send me a copy or go back.
I think it's in your
It's
materials.
in the materials.
Number two is, I'd like to be involved with that new task force that's reviewing the online courses that I think you just said you appointed.
It's a work group that we are going to be looking at.
Get involved in that one.
It's December.
It's on December
Welcome to go.
2nd. Yeah.
You're welcome to
10
go.
o'clock upstairs, yes.
Commissioner
And
Martinez.
was there another question?
There was. Thank you
Yes.
for all the work that you guys did.
Thank
One of the questions I had when we were talking about the special work group and all the invitations that are being sent out, I know we're really focused on correspondence, but are we also inviting some of the online-only folks to be part of that meeting as well?
I believe so. We have proprietary schools, Champions, we've got Kaplan, who are some of the others? I didn't bring that list with
You don't
me.
need to go through the list with me today.
Yeah.
Obviously, if we're all concerned about the best interests of the student and learning, I just wanted to make sure they were part of that equation as well.
Right.
Okay.
And we have never taken online off of the
I understand that.
table, so
We are
there will be some there. Yeah, I mean, we would never recommend
Sure,
that
I just
that
want
be
to make sure
taken
they were
off.
being included in the conversation.
Absolutely, they need to be, yes.
And I will add, in addition to proprietary schools and colleges and universities, we've expanded the invitation list. In fact, one of the attendees is from the Texas Higher Education Coordination Board, who is in charge of technical and community colleges. So I think we're going to get a lot of really good positive input.
Yeah, we're very excited about it. We don't want to throw anything away if it can be fixed.
Are there any other questions from Chairman Jones? Chairman Jones, before you leave, I know we're going to begin the process of accepting applicants and looking at other people to serve, and I just wanted to say on behalf of the commission how much we appreciate your hard work and dedication, and I don't believe when you said yes, you knew how much work it was going to be. And we appreciate that you took on the job, and please take back to the Education Standards Advisory Committee how much we appreciate everybody and all their hard work and their passion around improving the industry. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Agenda item 8, I believe the chairman of the broker responsibility has, Mr. McClure is not able to be here, and I believe Carrie Lewis is going to make that report on his behalf.
Yes, thank you. Carrie Lewis, General Counsel. Chair Mac McClure regrets that he could not attend. He had originally planned to attend, and he wanted me to thank the commission for allowing him to serve as chair, and he appreciates all the hard work of his committee members. The Broker Responsibility Group held a meeting on October 28th, 2014, and the working group, I don't know, should I start dancing?
Kind of dancing. It's good for me.
The working group
We were done with the education.
The working group recommends adoption of the revisions to the current point system used to evidence experience for broker's license that was proposed in Rule 535.56 that will be before you on your agenda today. These revisions address the fairness concerns in relation to commercial transactions, property management, and other miscellaneous transactions, and require the applicant to include a log identifying the properties for which points are claimed. The group discussed the pros and cons of requiring a broker to take the broker responsibility course prior to sponsoring any sales agents, but decided that it was not practical to implement. Likewise, the group debated the possibility of allowing continuing education credits to roll over to subsequent renewal periods, but determined that this was not desired and could be complicated to implement. So that's just their opinion on those issues. A formal recommendation was made by the group that the commission pursue legislative changes to the IABS statute to allow the commission to update the outdated IBS notice by rule. The group also reviewed a preliminary draft of changes that could be made to the IABS form if the legislature chooses to remove that required language from the current statute. The group agreed to continue to work on suggested changes, including notices regarding minimum services and identification of an agent's broker and supervisor for presentation to the commission at a future meeting. They do have a meeting scheduled currently for January 20th, 2015. And that is the end of the report.
Thank you, Ms. Lewis. I have not seen the chairman or the vice chairman of the inspector committee, or did they sneak in when I was not paying attention? So Ms. Warman's going to make that report.
Yes, good morning, Madam Chair and Commission members. The Inspector Committee met on Friday, October 10th of this year and discussed the proposed amendments that you will consider later to Chapter 535 and is happy with the decision to pull back on the changes to correspondence courses and looks forward to participating in the stakeholder group. Discussed earlier by Ms. Jones. The Inspector Committee also discussed and recommends amendments to Commission Rule 535.212 regarding the field work component of the substitute experience requirements that you will consider later at Agenda Item 21. And that's it. Thank you.
Thank you. Appreciate that. Agenda Item 10 is the opportunity for members to speak out what's on their mind, and we've actually had 2 people sign up to do that. And I would remind you that we have a 3-minute limit on what you say, and we hope you will honor that, and if you don't, I will make 3 minutes known to you. And we also would appreciate it if you did not repeat each other. And the first person I have who wishes to speak is Eddie Duran. Pass. Okay. And the next person that I have is Mike Cothran.
Thank you for letting me speak to you this morning. My name is Mike Cothran. I am a licensee of this commission. Today I'm here on behalf of a coalition of trade associations, the largest 3 for the state of Texas, TPREA, Terry, and InterNACHI. And is just to express that we thought perhaps since we had a meeting with the executive committee of the commission over Halloween, that this might have made the agenda today. We expect that hopefully it will, since it does involve an entire class of your licensees or licensees of the commission. The good news is that it was distributed to all commissioners before this meeting, even though it wasn't able to be, it wasn't in time to make the agenda and the materials. The coalition of these associations offered and still stands ready to have a work session with the commissioners or a group designated by the commissioners to work through this issue, perhaps explain it a little bit better and help the commission with this seeming issue with this class of licensees. From a personal quick standpoint, I would like to thank Michael Malloy and Gwen Jackson and their departments. I had interfaced with both this year. Very positive, very professional, and very timely, and the commissioners need to know that kudos are in order, and I appreciate it.
Thank you, Mike. Are there any other people who wish to speak on a non-agenda item? Okay, then we will move to agenda item 24, which we moved up earlier, and I believe Melissa Huerta is going to make a presentation on.
First, Greg Adams.
First, Greg Adams. Okay, Mr. Adams.
Good morning, Madam Chair, Commission members. My name is Greg Adams. I'm a member of the State Auditor's Office, and I was the project manager on the recent audit of the Real Estate Commission. I'm going to present the overall conclusions of the audit and a few of the findings, and then take any questions that you might have. The overall conclusion of the audit was threefold. Firstly, while the Commission accurately and completely accounted for license and permit revenue, it should improve its financial reporting. Secondly, the Commission sets fees based on its budgetary needs and assesses penalties in accordance with statute. The Commission collected approximately $10 million in license fees and more than $187,000 in penalties during fiscal year 2013. Finally, the Commission should strengthen user access controls to minimize the risk of unauthorized alteration or deletion of data. I'd like to talk about three of the findings that deal with the first of those conclusions. Firstly, as I said, the Commission accurately and completely recorded $23.5 million in license and permit revenue received during fiscal 2013. However, the Commission's fiscal year 2013 annual financial report was significantly misstated, with misstatements in both revenues and expenditures. For example, the Commission overstated revenues and transfers related to license and permit activities by approximately $4.1 million. Finally, the financial information in the Commission's fiscal year 2013 self-directed semi-independent agency report was incomplete. That report contained information only on operational revenues and expenditures. It did not present information on accounts totaling $16.7 million in non-operational revenues and fee surcharges and $16.4 million in non-operational expenditures, transfers, and payments of fee surcharges to third parties. That is my presentation. I'll be happy to answer any questions that you all may have.
Are there questions? Commissioner Arriaga?
Saw the response that our Executive Director sent, that that's the part about misstating the amount of money on the accounts. Is that correct? Is that what I heard correctly? Can you, I don't quite understand.
Ms. Huerta is going to explain that.
Are there other questions for Mr. Adams?
Well, we have the opportunity to ask Mr. Adams questions following Ms. Huerta's presentation regarding the State Auditor's Office.
Will you stay and answer other questions later? Okay, yes?
I'd like to find out if they're satisfied with our explanation.
Okay, thank you. So maybe we'll just hear from her, and then we'll see what we got to say to you and ask you. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Adams. Ms. Huerta?
Melissa Huerta, Director of Staff and Support Services. So the SAO did find some areas in our financial reporting where our agency needs to improve. The SAO report states that for fiscal year 2013, the agency accurately and completely recorded the $23.5 million in license and permit-related receipts, but we didn't report them correctly in our AFR. The license and permit revenue was overstated by $4.1 million. This was an error on the agency's part, which was a result of reporting pass-through receipts as revenue under TREC's operating account and reporting TALCB license fees and permits as transfers in instead of as revenue. So corrections were made and a revised 2013 AFR was issued. The SAO also found that expenditures were misstated in the AFR. This misstatement is related to the omission of compensable leave balance liability and capital asset expenses from the primary AFR exhibits. The balances were reported in our notes section of the AFR, which the vendor who compiled the AFR for us that year advised was sufficient. After discussion with the Comptroller's Office, it was determined that the expenses needed to be in both areas of the AFR. The revised AFR for 2013 rectified the omission of these balances in the primary AFR exhibits. The SAO report also notes that $16 million of non-operational or pass-through revenue expenses were not reported by the agency in our annual SDSI report for 2013. The pass-through funds that were omitted were the general revenue loan, which is an SDSI startup funds that were received and then returned to the Comptroller's Office, Texas A&M Real Estate Center fees that are collected by the agency and remitted back to Texas A&M, criminal history fees that are collected and remitted to DPS, professional fees collected on broker renewals and remitted to the Comptroller's Office for the General Revenue Fund, real estate recovery and real estate inspector recovery accounts, which are funds that are held in trust for the purpose of the trust account, and the Federal Registry fees that are collected and remitted to the Appraisal Institute. Pass-through funds are collected by this agency, but are passed on to other agencies per statute. All pass-through revenues were reported in our annual financial reports, but not in the SDSI. They were not included in the SDSI. A revised 2013 SDSI report was issued that included reports for the non-operational funds. The SDSI report issued November 1st of 2014 this year includes all revenue that's required by the statute. If you have any questions, I'd be happy to answer them.
Mr. Arriaga?
Still don't understand how, in the time I've been here, I heard the word overstatement, understatement, or misstatement in an audit before. How did that occur?
That occurred because the way that we reported the monies in that year, they were reported under our, we have an account where we collect all our monies in their safekeeping trust, and then they're transferred out to the appropriate accounts when we determine how they should be accounted for, because that's the way the safekeeping trust operates. They won't split them up as we receive them. We have to receive them in one account. Well, in that account, our contracted person that we contracted to do the AFR included the fees that were collected for the professional fees, the general revenue monies. He accounted for them or reported them in that account, but he also put them in a fiduciary funds exhibit that's in the AFR, so they were included in both places. And then for TALCB, the revenues were not included in the revenue portion of the exhibit. They were included as transfers in, instead of being, and that's because the way that the contractor understood our accounts, the way that since we transfer out from the safekeeping trust to accounts, he was considering those instead of actually accounting for them under license fees and permits. They were in the transfers in. So the difference between the two was the $4.1 million.
Last question. I think I follow you, because all this is what we call non-operational account, the 16-point-something million that is passed through to the
Yes.
A&Ms. Are those pass-throughs audited? I'm sure the answer would be yes. Are those pass-through audited in those different agencies?
Are they audited by the different agencies? I wouldn't be able to tell you, I wouldn't be able to answer if they're audited by the different agencies. I know that for A&M, we provide them with an account at the end of the year, letting them know what we collected, the number of license fees that applies to, so that they can, they can account, they know how we arrived at the amount that we gave them.
What are we doing for it not to happen next year?
For it not to happen the next year, we received guidance from the SAO, which was, I was very grateful for them coming in and letting us know that we interpreted the statute wrong for not, because what we included in the SDSI report was just what was operational funds, and we're supposed to account for all revenues received by the agency. So now we know that all revenues have to be reported that way.
Thank you, Ms. President.
You're very welcome.
Commissioner Martinez?
Thank you for the explanation. So ultimately, we're talking about a misclassification and reallocation of those entries so that it's trued up, and now moving forward, we won't have that, it won't happen again.
Yes, sir.
And I do see in the overall response that, we're going to ensure that our contractor is classifying things properly.
Yes, and actually, I did the annual financial report this year, and with the assistance from the SAO, because they let me know where things should be accounted for, and so now and with the comptroller's office also, with their guidance, I was able to compile the AFR for the agency for this year.
Okay. And my remaining questions for Mr. Adams.
Oh, yes, sir.
Thank you.
So did I hear you accurately now that we had a third party, an outside third party contractor
Yes.
vendor that performed the 2013 AFR and SDSI report, and you're going to be compiling the AFR internally this year?
Yes, sir.
Okay, and you have adequate understanding of procedures via the statute, having been through this audit process now once?
Yes.
Okay.
That helped me immensely.
Audits can be helpful.
Yes.
And numbers can look scary, but they can be helpful. So I want to ask this just to make sure we're clear on our record. When you revised our AFR and you revised our SDSI report, to put it colloquially, did everything square up once you revised it?
I submitted it to the SAO. To me, it was correct, and I don't know if they considered it correct or if they were able to review it.
Okay, let's hear from him, unless there's any more.
Mr. Adams, maybe kind of stay close.
I would say that I used the data that Ms. Huerta did, and we compiled numbers that materially agreed with those of Ms. Huerta. And so I think the answer to your question is yes. All the 2013 numbers that Ms. Huerta and I calculated using the same source data are significantly the same.
Are there other questions for Mr. Adams or Ms. Huerta on this subject matter? Any other questions?
No, thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Adams. We appreciate your time. Appreciate you coming to our meeting today. And thank you. Okay. I have not had an opportunity to ask our attorney how long we will need to have an executive session, but we are going to go into executive session to discuss pending litigation or obtain advice of legal counsel on agenda items pursuant to whatever it is pursuant to that I was not given this time. It's a code. Texas Government Code. 551.071 and half an hour.
45 minutes to an hour.
Let's say 45 minutes, 10:45. So we go into executive session. We'll see you guys in a little bit. I know, I was trying to get their attention. Good afternoon. Morning. It's afternoon in another time zone. Call the meeting back to order at 10:50 and pass the gavel to Commissioner Turner, who will handle agenda items 12 and 13. Commissioner Turner.
All right, moving on to agenda item 12. pardon me while I get organized. For consideration and possible action regarding proposals for decisions in the matters of Texas Real Estate Commission versus Ronnie McCullough and Texas Real Estate Commission versus Gilbert Quinones. Ms. Lewis, I understand you're going to be presenting these.
Is this on? Yeah, okay. Yes, the, in the matter of, in the matter of Ronnie McCullough, a proposal for decision was issued by ALJ Howard Seitzman, and no exceptions were filed. So I will leave it for, oh, I'm sorry. The ALJ recommended that the license be suspended for a year. I lost my sheet of paper. And that an administrative penalty of $7,750 be assessed.
Anyone from staff have a presentation for the commission?
Yes, Mark Moore, Director of Standards and Enforcement Services. We agree with the proposal for decision and recommend its adoption. We don't think the respondent is present. Attorney Mike Malloy is also present to answer any questions you have about the case.
Mr. McCullough, are you present, or is counsel for Mr. McCullough present? Okay. Commissioners, do you have any questions for Mr. Moore or for the staff attorney that directly prosecuted this action? Okay. I'll entertain a motion.
Mr. Chairman?
Yes, Commissioner Arriaga.
I move on item 12, is it on? On item agenda 12A, I move that the commission adopt the administrative laws judge finding of fact and conclusions of law as set out in the proposal for decisions in order that Texas Professional Inspector license of Ronnie McCullough be suspended for 12 months and assess an administrative penalty of $7,750.
I have a motion. Do I have a second?
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, moving on to 12B, Ms. Lewis.
Okay, in this case, the matter of Gilbert Julian Quinones, the proposal for decision dated September 10th, 2014 was issued by the ALJ, which recommended a $15,000 administrative penalties. The commission staff filed an exception to the proposal for decision dated September 25th, requesting that certain findings of fact and conclusions of law be changed. And the ALJ responded on October 15th without making any changes to the PFD as issued.
Thank you, Ms. Lewis. Mr. Moore?
Mark Morgan. We don't think the respondent's present, our attorney on this one either. Ms. Zimmerman was the attorney on the case. She may be present to answer some of the questions as well, although I think I'll be able to handle most of them. There's a lot of detail on this. We mostly agree with the judge, but on the areas we disagree, they're actually pretty strong disagreement, and so we have some very serious legal concerns on this one. It's my understanding, since we're asking to have the proposal for decision changed, that I do need to read exactly what we are recommending as staff to change. Basically, there are two main areas we disagreed with. One, we think the judge went way too far in broker responsibility and essentially said that a broker's responsibility for the property management activities of a salesperson, there can never be liability on it. That's how I read it. He did it in both documents he submitted. Then the other area we have strong disagreement on is there's two statutes. We refer to them internally as A5 and A6. They're actually sections 1101.652A5 and A6, and they both have to do with getting information and documents. One, A5, which I'll use as shorthand, is documents related to a real estate transaction from a license holder, and then the other is information related to a complaint from a license holder. So they're not identical, but they certainly overlap some, and perhaps that was a judge's concern, but he went, in our opinion, way too far in that he almost essentially said that one of the statutes doesn't apply and you don't get both. This was contrary to commission precedent. Even as recently as August 18th, the last commission meeting, y'all approved a proposal of a decision which imposed multiple counts of A5 and A6. The difference is a different ALJ, is about the only thing we could figure on that. I will go ahead and go through some of this detail. Obviously, y'all can stop me at any time and ask a question, but I'll go through some of the detail and give you some of the specifics on this. I think we're on the right page. It's actually page 78 of your materials. We ask that the Commission strike PFD findings of fact 12, 19, 26, and 32, and adopt new findings of fact 12, 19, 26, and 32. In number 12, in early December 2013, Roy Minton, an investigator employed by the Commission, began an investigation of the Coleman complaint. Mr. Minton left phone messages and sent emails to Mr. Quinones, all of which were not responded to by Mr. Quinones. Mr. Minton also sent a certified letter to Mr. Quinones requesting information related to the complaint made by Mr. Coleman, as well as documents and records relating to transactions conducted by Mr. Quinones. Mr. Quinones failed to respond to any of these requests and did not provide the requested information, documents, and records. The next one is number 19. Terry Lynn Kaufman, an investigator employed by the Commission, then commenced an investigation of the Harper complaint. On June 5, 2013, Ms. Kaufman sent a certified letter to Mr. Quinones requesting documents and records in Mr. Quinones' possession related to real estate transactions conducted by Mr. Quinones. Mr. Quinones did not respond to the letter or provide the requested documents and records. Number 26. And I'm actually reading the parts that are already in there a little quicker and the new parts a little slower. In early November 2013, Roy Minton began an investigation of the Gott complaint. Mr. Minton left phone messages and sent emails to Mr. Quinones, all of which were not responded to by Mr. Quinones. Mr. Minton also sent a certified letter to Mr. Quinones requesting information related to the complaint made by Mr. Gott, as well as documents and records relating to transactions conducted by Mr. Quinones. Mr. Quinones failed to respond to any of these requests and did not provide the requested information, documents, and records. Finding of fact 32. That's on page 80 of the materials. In January 2014, Roy Minton began an investigation of the Edwards complaint. Mr. Minton left phone messages and sent emails to Mr. Quinones, all of which were not responded to by Mr. Quinones. Mr. Minton also sent a certified letter to Mr. Quinones requesting information related to the complaint made by Mr. Edwards, as well as documents and records relating to transactions conducted by Mr. Quinones. Mr. Quinones failed to respond to any of these requests and did not provide the requested information, documents, and records. The specific reasons and legal basis for deleting and replacing these findings and facts contained in the PFD are the following. The findings in the PFD don't really reflect the evidence that was presented at hearing. There were two types of evidence we asked for: information related to complaint and documents related to transactions. He failed to produce that under two separate statutory provisions passed by the legislature. Commission investigators, as well as other agency staff, rely on these statutes and have for many years during their investigation. The ALJ improperly ignored these laws, holding without legal citation that the legislature did not intend for both laws to be enforced. Absent some other law or legal precedent, the Commission is entitled to enforce both laws, and the facts related to enforcement of those laws are relevant. And to the contrary, we have a lot of precedent, as I mentioned, from the Commission to apply both laws. On finding of fact 19, the judge mixed up the two. On that one, we did not plead in A5 and A6 because the facts were different. We only pled in A5, but he used facts for an A6. So in other words, he referred to information related to complaint, and he should have, if he had not made a mistake, referred to documents related to a real estate transaction. So we tried to correct that. That was finding of fact 19. Our proposed changes to the PFD's conclusions of law. We asked that the Commission strike PFD conclusions of law 5 through 10 and substitute new conclusions of law 5 through 9 as follow. Number 5, this is on page 81 of the materials. Staff proved that Mr. Quinones' actions and inactions with respect to Mr. Gott and the Commission's investigation of his complaint violated Texas Occupation Code Section 1101.652A5, Section 1101.652A6, and 1101.652B9. Number 6, staff failed to prove that Mr. Quinones' actions and inactions with respect to Mr. Gott violated 22 Texas Administrative Code, Section 535.2. Number 7, staff proved that Mr. Quinones' actions and inactions with respect to the Colemans and the Commission's investigation of their complaint violated Texas Occupation Code Section 1101.652A5, Section 1101.652A6, and Section 1101.652B9. Number 8, staff failed to prove that Mr. Quinones' actions and inactions with respect to the Colemans violated 22 Texas Administrative Code, Section 535.2. Number 9, staff proved that Mr. Quinones' actions and inactions with respect to Mr. Edwards and the Commission's investigation of his complaint violated Texas Occupation Code Section 1101.652A5, Section 1101.652A6, and Section 1101.652B9. Based on these changes, we ask that conclusions of law 11 through 13 be renumbered as 10 through 12. We also ask that the Commission strike PFD Conclusion of Law 14 and substitute a new Conclusion of Law 13 as follows. This is on page 82 of the materials. Number 13, new number 13, old number 14. Based upon consideration of the facts set forth in Texas Occupation Code Section 1101.702 and the schedule of penalties set forth in 22 Texas Administrative Code Section 535.191, it is appropriate for the Commission to assess administrative penalties against Mr. Quinones totaling $18,000, broken down as follows. $4,000 for 4 violations of Texas Occupation Code Section 1101.652A5, $3,000 for 3 violations of Texas Occupation Code Section 1101.652A6, and $11,000 for 4 violations of Texas Occupation Code Section 1101.652B9. What we're changing there, we are asking that the penalty be increased from $15,000 to $18,000 because we added three, or you think we proved, and they were already pled, but we proved 3 counts, additional counts of A5. So that was an additional $3,000. That's using the same penalty amount that the judge held for the violations of A5 and A6 it already had. The penalty range for those is $500 to $3,000, so we did not think that $1,000 for each violation, repeated violation, was excessive in that situation. The specific reasons and legal basis for deleting and replacing these conclusions of law contained in the PFD are the following. Commission precedent, which I already mentioned, consistently imposes liability for violations of both statutes passed by the Texas legislature. And as recently as August 18th, the Commission adopted an April 8th, 2014 proposal for decision that adopted both A5 and A6 violations. And you've also the Commission's also entered dozens of final orders imposing liabilities over many years. The conclusions of law did not reflect all violations committed by Mr. Quinones because they failed to acknowledge that he also violated Section 1101.652A5 for an additional 3 counts. He also cited a single act theory. It wasn't supported by any legal citation, so we didn't even know how to respond to that. I try not to get cocky in those situations, so we asked the judge if there was a legal basis, because sometimes you think you know everything and then there's 10 cases that say the opposite. The judge provided nothing. He just cited himself for like a third of his response, and that's not really legal authority to cite yourself. So we didn't really know what to do with this single act theory. The ALJ also improperly failed to recognize the validity of the Commission's request under both statutes, A5 and A6. It's a lot. Do you have any questions on the A5 or A6?
Commissioners have any questions for Mr. Moore? Mr. Quinones, are you present? We have counsel for Mr. Quinones present. Okay. Do I have a motion?
I've got a motion, but before I make that, Mr. Moore, I appreciate you taking time to explain to the audience that there's multiple cases there's multiple offenses that have taken place in this situation. And, one of the things I know that we're all concerned about is we don't want any judge legislating from the bench, which is essentially what we've had here. And so I'd like to make a motion to synopsize what we're doing as a body moving forward at this time. So I'm going to move that the proposed motion for this agenda item 12B, TREC versus Quinones. I move that the Commission adopt the administrative law judge's findings of fact and conclusions of law as set out in the proposal for decision except as follows. Findings of fact numbers 12, 19, and 26 and 32 are replaced with the findings of fact for those numbers presented by Commission staff. Conclusions of law numbers 5 through 10 are stricken, and new conclusions of law 5 through 9, as presented by Commission staff, are inserted. Conclusions of law 11 through 13 are renumbered as 10 through 12. Conclusions of law 14 is stricken, and new conclusion of law 13, as presented by Commission staff, is inserted, and that Mr. Quinones is ordered to pay an administrative penalty of $18,000. Further, that the final order reflect the following specific reasons and legal basis for the changes made to the findings of fact and conclusions of law by the Commission. The Commission determined, in accordance with Commission Rule 533.7, that the administrative law judge did not properly apply or interpret applicable law and prior administrative decisions. The Commission changed the listed findings of fact because those findings of fact in the proposal for decision do not fully reflect the evidence presented at hearing, since they did not recognize the distinction between the requests for documents related to the transactions and other information requested related to the complaints Mr. Quinones was asked for both and failed to produce either. Each is considered a distinct violation under two separate statutory provisions in the Texas Occupations Code, Sections 1101.652A, parentheses 5, and 1101.652A, parentheses 6. Prior administrative decisions of the Commission have consistently recognized violations of these two statutory provisions as separate and distinct in connection with the investigation of a complaint. The administrative law judge improperly interpreted these laws, holding, without legal citation, that the legislature did not intend for both laws to be enforced at the same time. The Commission changed finding of fact 19 because the ALJ found a Section 1101.652A5 violation for this fact. And you can see the conclusion of Law 3 at page 81 of 356 of the materials in the PFD page 22, but mistakenly drafted this finding as if it were a Section 1101.652A6 violation. The Commission changed the listed conclusions of law because those conclusions of law in the proposal for decision did not reflect all violations committed by Mr. Quinones, because they failed to acknowledge that he also violated Section 1101.652A5, Texas Occupations Code, for an additional 3 counts. The single act theory referenced by the administrative law judge is unsupported by any legal citation, including legislative intent, and is therefore insufficient to overturn a law passed by the Texas legislature. Prior administrative decisions of the Commission have consistently recognized violations of Sections 1101.652A5 and 1101.652A6 of the Texas Occupations Code as separate and distinct in connection with the investigation of a complaint. In conclusion, the Commission increased the administrative penalty recommended by the administrative law judge from $15,000 to $18,000 to include $1,000 for each additional count of a violation of Texas Occupational Code 1101.652A5.
Second.
I have a motion. Do I have a second?
Second.
Okay, all those in favor?
Wait,
Yes, sir.
can we ask Ms. Martinez to read the motion again?
I have a heck of a motion. Do I have a second?
For the record, I will submit this to the to our general counsel to be as part of the minutes.
Okay, all those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? All right. Thank you, Mr. Moore.
We also wanted to address broker responsibility, which I don't know if y'all were prepared to rule on that or not. We thought the judge went way too far on broker responsibility under Rule 535.2D, because he determined that Mr. Quinones, as a broker, could not be legally held responsible under that rule. And in fact, he said, indeed, it is not even possible to violate that section. We disagree with that, although we don't disagree with the conclusion of law or finding of fact, which is the main part that we wanted to address here. We do want to emphasize that we do believe that is a violation. When your salesperson does something, property management, you can be held legally responsible for that under that rule in conjunction with another violation. It doesn't stand on its own, but I think that those have to be done together, and I think the judge went way too far on that area. And we are asking that the commission perhaps repudiate that part of the analysis or say that that's wrong. I know.
Could you point us to that in the proposal for decision again, please?
Yes, it's pages 70 through 71 of your material, so it's the bottom of page 70, top of 71. And we actually, in our exceptions, we tried to get that struck, and we offered what we thought was a graceful way out, because most of the witnesses testified on on the broker's activities and didn't really testify much on the salesperson. So we said, well, you can just say that you never proved that violation. But instead, he said legally there can never be a violation of that. And then when we did our exceptions, he doubled down on a pair of eights, in my opinion, and said that I didn't have to get to that because I determined that he's can never be legally responsible. And I would ask the commission to say that that's just incorrect. That's just the wrong statement, because the rule does matter. You passed the rule, you voted on it, you put it in the penalty matrix.
Chairman Wukash, in this particular, because of what we're talking about, do we want to address this separately, totally at our next meeting, or do we want to go ahead and take action on it now?
Yeah,
I would think, Chairman Turner, we need to do it now.
I think that's fine, and I'd entertain a motion to that effect if somebody can make one.
Might be entertaining to make one.
Yeah.
Without advice from council.
Well, just
If you look on page 91, you see.
just to be clear, I don't think the commission has the authority to put something in its order regarding the analysis made by the ALJ if it's not affecting the findings of fact or conclusions of law. So I don't think that would be proper to be in an order. If you just want to make some type of statement on the record, I believe you could do that.
Or, Mr. Chairman, or if you have the authority, take his broker's license and make him a salesperson. That way he's responsible.
I believe he's already revoked.
He is revoked.
Actually, this is why the only thing that
I
was.
just want to go on record to tell the court that we can do that.
Yes, I would obviously take an oral statement if we don't have authority to modify, because I think that part of the analysis was wrong, and I don't think that's the commission's position at all.
So the statement from the commission might be that our expectation is that the broker is responsible for the acts of their salespeople in the property management field and others. Is that?
Yes, and that
kind of
liability can be found under that rule in conjunction with other facts and law.
We believe that liability can be found under these facts.
That's
I think
motion
that would be perhaps our statement that I just read.
Would
into the
we
record.
want this to be officially communicated to the ALJ, that we, as a memo to the ALJ from the commission?
I don't think so. No.
Okay.
I second that if that's a motion, Madam Chair.
Do you want a motion or you just want a statement?
It's really not a motion. I think it's just a statement that you would make, and you could say there's consensus.
It seems to be a consensus of the commissioners that the statement that I made is how we all feel, perhaps.
Are there any commissioners opposed to making that statement or take issue with that statement?
Thank you.
Then I'd like the record to reflect that the commission agrees with the staff. We understand that we can't reform the proposal for a decision based on the advice of legal counsel, but we want to make it abundantly clear that it's the commission's position that a broker is liable for the actions of their salespersons in violation of this rule.
Thank you.
Mr.
That
Moore?
does provide clarity for us. Thank you.
I believe we'll move on to agenda item 13 at this time, which is discussion and possible action to authorize settlement of recovery fund claims or take other action on several topics. Martinez Manuel et al. Versus Reyes Robert et al. Parker and Parker versus Guadalupe Colindres, Townline Properties LLC, Miguel Lozano versus Manassar D. Marshall, Richard B. Notley versus Bill Khalil, and finally Kearns and Kearns versus Crosby et al. Although I will note that the commission will be taking no action today on the last of those, RF 15-002, Kearns and Kearns versus Crosby et al. So we will begin with RF 14-010, Martinez Manuel et al. Versus Reyes Robert et al. Ms. Lewis?
Actually, since you've introduced it, I really don't need to do anything else.
Okay.
Just if you could ask if there is a motion on this for
Pardon me.
settlement.
Mr. Chairman, in the matter reference 14-010, I recommend that we authorize payment of actual damages of $48,246.55 plus interest, court costs, and attorney fees of $15,000 upon receipt of additional documentation that is required by general counsel.
Okay, we have a motion. Do we have a second? All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? All right. Never give a lawyer a microphone, right? We're moving on to RF 15-004. Do we have any questions from the commission for Ms. Lewis on that one?
No.
Do I have a motion?
I'd like to make a motion to authorize payment of actual damages of $10,000 plus interest and court costs for reference number 15-004.
Second.
Okay, any opposed? Excuse me, all those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? All right. Move on to RF 14-009. Do we have any questions for Ms. Lewis on Miguel Lozano versus Manasseh D. Marshall? Okay. Do we have a motion?
Mr. Chairman, I authorize payment of actual damages and attorney's fees in the amount of $8,633.51 plus interest and court costs.
Do we have a second? Second from Ms. Justice. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? And lastly, RF 15-006, Richard B. Notley versus Bill Khalil. Any questions for Ms. Lewis on that item? And do we have a motion?
Mr. Chairman, I'd like to move that in the case of 15-006, we authorize payment of actual damages of $42,000 plus interest, court costs, and reasonable attorney's fees.
We have a second. Second from Commissioner Justice. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Hearing none, we'll move on to agenda item 14, and I will return the virtual gavel to Chairwoman Wukash.
Thank you, Commissioner Turner, for sitting in on that job. We are going to bring up agenda item 14, which has a variety of sub-chapters, and it will be presented by Ms. Lewis, General Counsel, and I have some speakers on specific sub-chapters that we will call in order as we go along, and then take action if that's what the Commission desires at the end of that time. Ms. Lewis.
Okay, so this is discussion and possible action to adopt amendments to and repeal certain sections of 22 TAC Chapter 535 involving subchapters A through T. The proposed amendments were published in the September 5th and October 24th issues of Texas Register, and several comments were received on the proposals, and staff is recommending several changes to the text as published. Those proposed changes are set out in green type in the attached materials. Hopefully you've had a chance to look at those, or you can refer to those as we go through these items. Comments were received on each rule, and suggested text. The comments received on each rule and the suggested text differences highlighted in green will be described in each subchapter. So I'll just go through each subchapter. If there's no changes or comments or commenters that want to speak on it, we'll move on to the next. So you can just let me know. Subchapter A added new definitions and terms, and no comments were received, and no changes were made to the amendments as published. Do we have any speakers?
No.
Subchapter B, no comments were received on this proposal, but non-substantive changes to the text are proposed in 535.2B to correct grammatical errors, and in 535.5B to rewrite the last sentence and add it to the preceding sentence for greater clarity. Subchapter D, no comments were received except a recommendation from the Education Standards Advisory Committee that committee members be staggered for better continuity of committee work as members rotate off the committee. And staff agrees and recommends that change to the text as proposed, and to clarify that the certain text that was outlined about minutes and reports to the committee to be consistent.
I have one speaker, Mike Cothran, who asked to speak on 14D. 3 minutes, don't repeat each other.
Name is Mike Cothran. I'm here on behalf of the Coalition of Texas Inspector Groups, TPRIA, Terry, and Internachi. And I realize that, and specifically, excuse me, specifically 535.43 is actually a movement from a different area. And that was established last year. I would remind you, though, that in 2012, this was how long this was This particular 535.75 is the one that's moving to 535.43. This was as long as it was 2 years ago. I am realizing that it's only a move, okay? Two things very quickly. One is it's regarding the Education Standards Advisory Committee, that the makeup of this advisory committee specifically includes proprietary schools owners, but it actually does not include your other stakeholder in this, and that would be your other education provider, and that's your trade associations. Provide a lot of education to Texas inspectors. I would ask that you reconsider that before you pass this. It would be nice to have all stakeholders present when decisions are made on education. The other thing was that it may not have been your intent as a commission to establish ESOC over, for example, in specifically in my case, the Inspector Advisory Committee, but in reality, and in practice over the last, say, since the middle of summer, that in fact is the way it's been working, particularly to the Inspector Advisory Committee. So if that's your intent to do that, that's fine. That effectively has taken the function away in practice again from the Inspector Committee, and it may be some additional thought might be needed here. And that's what I have.
Thank you. No other speakers on D. Thank you.
If I may, I'd like to respond to that comment.
That's fine.
Actually, education, approval of education for inspectors is under the inspector committee's purview. And I think there may have been some confusion while discussing correspondence courses, but I believe the ESAC committee has made it abundantly clear that they are responsible for the real estate education and the inspectors are responsible for the inspector education. There is a lot of similarity. There is some overlap. Everything that ESAC has approved has been brought before the inspector committee, and they have also approved it with the exception of certain specific changes for the inspector committee or for the inspectors, which is embodied in the rules that were proposed.
Doesn't the inspector committee have an education subcommittee?
They do.
That sort of vets.
They do.
Stuff?
And because there is some overlap, say, on these correspondence type courses and some differences, ESAC has included and extended an invitation to the chair of that subcommittee to be informed, and so that there is some consistency, because we do want consistency across license type unless there's a specific reason why there should be a difference, and that is what is considered by the education subcommittee of the inspectors.
Thank you.
Okay. Subchapter E, the biggest change there was to revise the experience points for a broker's license based on recommendations from the Broker Responsibility Working Group. 2 comments were received on this rule. One basically requested that no changes be made and leave it like it is, and the other one suggested the entire experience point system be completely overhauled. Broker Responsibility Working Group respectfully declined to recommend either of those changes and recommends moving forward with the changes that were proposed.
There are no speakers on this item. I would point out to the commissioners that both of those comments are in your materials.
Correct. Subchapter F, and I think I'm going to do subchapter F and G together for the most part.
Actually, I have a bunch of speakers on F and no speakers on G, so
Okay.
I probably need you to do F alone.
We'll do F alone, and then when we get to G, we'll just say ditto. Okay. So for subchapter F, we received 16 comments. Almost all of them had to do with the proposed elimination of correspondence courses effective as of December 31st, 2015. Some were in favor and some were opposed. As Chairman Jones reported already, at ESAC, these comments were considered. Additional information was presented by staff, and they are pulling back on this recommendation and leaving correspondence courses as currently, as in the current rule for the time being while they continue to study this matter. In Section 535.66, they did also recommend that the references to academic credit was too narrow and the language should be tied more closely to statutory language to read, comply with curriculum accreditation standards required of the college or university by the applicable regional accreditation association is what is in the material. I would, however, recommend one adjustment to that, and that is remove the word regional, since the definition in 535.66A does allow for national or international accreditation bodies. So that would be one adjustment to what is in your materials. Other comments that were made regarding various aspects are set out in your materials, but staff did not recommend making any changes based on those comments, nor did the ESAC for those that were considered. There is one additional change that staff suggests that are outlined in green in your materials that were not made based on comments, but based on putting the correspondence courses back into the rule, and that is to clarify that students' questions must be answered in a timely manner, and a student must complete all instructional modules to receive credit for a course, and we have that in place for alternative delivery, and just to make it clear that the same standard applies to correspondence. And that were all of the proposed changes to subchapter F, if you want to have your commenters come
So
up.
before I bring in the speakers, I want to be sure that in the body of what we have before us, the word regional is gone from 535.66.
That is my recommendation, yes.
Is it gone now? Is it in green gone? Or
It is in there in green, but I am recommending, so if you look on page...
It's about 156.
Well, look on page
156 in our materials.
Yeah.
And it's, I think, on the right-hand side, it's under 2. I think it's where the word regional appears.
Right, and it's in several places in these rules, in this subchapter. I think it's also...
Anytime it's anywhere, take it out?
Anytime it's anywhere, I would recommend taking it out. That's what was in our old rule, so it was put back in. However, the definition does go beyond that, so I think we should be consistent with that definition.
So when we get over here to the motion, do we need to make reference to that?
I think when you make the motion, you're just going to say changes as presented by staff, or if you make other changes based on presentations today, you would just state those.
Thank you. Are you done? Our first speaker, Tony Hernandez, 3 minutes. He left. Okay. Well, then you're next, Stan. So come on. Mr. Harbuck.
Thank you. I appreciate your patience. I was looking at the agenda item for last meeting.
Okay.
Appreciate it. Much work has been involved in the development of the quadrennial review, and but at the same time, much good has come from the current process as well. And we have better definitions, better and more clear rules on licensing, training, and examinations, better instructor requirements, better course requirements, streamlining of some processes, and better continuing education rules and processes, amongst other things that are real positives about this, I think. At the last meeting, there was vehement opposition to banning correspondence courses. We all heard that. Unfortunately, while the direct ban was essentially removed from the proposed rule, the new provisions affecting universities and colleges, the only providers of TREC-approved correspondence courses, were left in. Please finish finish the process, if you would, and restore correspondence courses to their current status as they have existed since the mid-90s by modifying these new proposed rules affecting universities and colleges. There are other good reasons for this too. State statutes that were relied upon decades ago to avoid double regulation of universities and colleges that offer TREC courses still exist. In fact, a past legislative session, in a past legislative session, a change in the statutes was considered for this reason and was turned down. Please reconsider the rules with this in mind, if you would. Please ask staff to modify the provisions regulating universities and colleges to maintain the status quo as requested in the comments that we heard last meeting and in some of the written comments, including considering deleting proposed section 535.66, and then revisit their proposed changes in the next TREC meeting if you would. And then the only other significant comment I had here was on 535.61. B2E. By the way, I've sent you an email on this. Although I didn't get it to you until after the meeting actually started today, I apologize for that. But that's the one on exempting national trade associations. And our recommendation is that you require that those national associations have elected officers and directors. And you may say, why should that be a requirement? Don't they all have to have that? The fact of the matter is not, and there's a brief discussion in my email to you that kind of explains what we've seen happening when trainers set up these nonprofits that are not really truly nonprofits, end up being for-profits for the trainer instead. And yet they use these exemptions that some of the states put out there for nonprofits as to be able to get the benefits of both sides of that world. So the staff says that more study is needed before action is taken on this item. We agree. That is our suggestion. If more study is needed, the exemption, we would ask that the exemption not be allowed until that further study is completed, rather than providing the blanket exception at this time. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Harbuck. Mike Cothran.
My name is Mike Cothran. I know you're getting tired of hearing from me. I'm sorry, this is my last time up today. Again, for Tapria, Terry, and Internachi, and I call your attention to the proposed or the posted 535.63 approval for instructors.
Hold on, that's on page 150 if you're trying to keep up. Go ahead.
And just as an overall, it lends some understanding of why it's maybe not always a good idea to try to create the rules to where they cover both the agents and the inspectors, because they do have independent needs. That's a little convoluted. I will tell you that I'm currently an approved TREC instructor for both agents and inspectors. And as I read through this, it was difficult for me to tell that I will still be approved when the deadlines fall. One of the other things that I wanted to call your attention to was an undefined completion certificate, and that might need to be a little better defined. Obviously, your instructor staff or pool is, you want them to be a little bit better at teaching, and I agree. Sometimes experience is the best teacher, so please don't forget that could be an applicable criteria all in its own, without spending 16 or 8 hours or whatever you might deem necessary at a school to get this certificate. That's what I have.
Thank you, Mike. We appreciate you going shorter than 3 minutes. Dan Hatfield. Thank you for your patience, Mr. Hatfield.
Thank you, Madam Chair. My name's Dan Hatfield. I'm the chairman of the 2014 chairman of the Texas Association of Realtors. And basically, I'd just like to state our support for the Education Standards Advisory Committee current recommendations before you today to leave correspondence courses as a delivery method for the time being, and while stakeholders are engaged to more closely examine the issues and possible solutions to the problems presented by correspondence and other distance learning courses. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Hatfield. Appreciate your limiting your verbosity. Ms. Lewis? We were going to do G.
I don't know how that...
Is that right?
Subchapter F dealt with the core, what we now call qualifying education. Subchapter G deals with continuing education. So we had some of the exact same comments. People who commented on F commented on G, and most of those dealt, again, with the correspondence courses. Let's see. So really, there's no other additional changes other than those ones that were outlined for subchapter F, and those are outlined in green in your material.
Thank you. No speakers.
Okay, subchapter H, staff is recommending that section 535.81 not be adopted as proposed and be proposed for repeal later on this agenda, since it's inconsistent with another amendment regarding fees that is up for adoption. And that just has to deal with the payment of the fee upon original application to the recovery fund.
So we're not going to do that? Is that what you're saying?
Right, so when you do your proposal, staff would recommend that you not include section 535.81, so that would be our recommendation.
Okay, we're just making sure that we're getting the motion right when it happens. And I think that nullifies the written comment that we received on this item also. Is that correct, since we're not doing it?
We're on page 205 now?
That's a good question. Yeah, yes, sir. Yes.
Right.
Okey dokey.
Okay, any other questions on that?
That's it.
Okay. Subsection J, no comments were received, and no, I'm sorry. I skipped one. Subsection I, no comments were received on this proposal, but staff recommends non-substantive changes to the text proposed in 535.93G to explain that the rules for reactivation of an inactive license are found in subchapter L. That's just to help with clarity of reading the rules. And additionally, section 535.92H2, granting partial credit for elective CE courses, should be deleted, since under the amendments proposed in subchapter G, providers are no longer allowed to give partial credit for elective CE courses, and this was just an oversight. And it would make this provision ineffective and meaningless. Leaving it in would cause confusion. So we're just recommending consistency. No comments were received on subchapter J or L. In subchapter N, we received no comments, but staff is recommending the following non-substantive changes, which are outlined in green in your materials. Insert the word active in the last sentence of section 535.148A to clarify the existing law that a license holder must be active to share in a commission, including by referral. This has been the standard, but the rule could use a little more clarity. So that's just clarifying what's in existence. And then change reasonable times to 10 days in 535.154D to be consistent with the standards changes made throughout the chapter. As you recall, throughout the chapter, we took out reasonable time and put in the actual time that would apply to make it easier for stakeholders, license holders, and the public to know what those timeframes were. This was just one that we missed.
Okay.
Subchapter R. No comments were received on this proposal, but based on oral comments received from a trade association, staff recommends the commission reduce the fee for continuing education courses for inspectors from $50 plus $10 per classroom hour to $50 plus $5 per classroom hour to encourage development of continuing education courses for the relatively small pool of inspectors. Additionally, staff recommends non-substantive changes to the text as proposed in section 535.215 to reference another subsection for clarity, to correct subsection numbering, and to rewrite the paragraphs on returning to active status to make the process easier to understand. The process wasn't changed, it just was a little confusing, and so we gave it more clarity.
Okay. We have no comment.
No comments were received on subsection T. So in summary, staff recommends repealing the rules as published and as presented, adopt amendments to rules and any forms adopted by reference as published, and recommend changes presented by staff at this meeting, except do not adopt Section 535.81, which will be repealed, which will be proposed for repeal later in the meeting, and Section 535.53, business entity designated broker, which will be reproposed later in this meeting.
Thank you. Commissioner Jones?
Two other things. Additionally, we would like in the motion, we would like to authorize, commission to authorize staff to make any necessary changes to application forms to reflect changes in terminologies, fees, or processes as set out in these amendments. And finally, that all of these rules and forms be adopted with an effective date of January 1st, 2015.
Commissioner Jones?
Clarification, just a question, that word regional that we removed, that's a non-substantive change?
That is.
Okay. Madam
Changes made here today by staff.
Madam Chairman, move that the staff is authorized on behalf of this commission to submit for adoption amendments to and repeal of Rules 22 TAC Chapter 535 as previously published in the Texas Registry with changes to the text as provided by staff, along with any technical or non-substantive changes required for adoption except for 535.53 and 535.81, business entity designated broker, which is not adopted, with changes as submitted by staff today to be effective January the 1st, 2015. And additionally, staff is authorized to make any changes. What, did I miss that sentence?
Right here. To the application form.
To make changes, the application form is reflected in terminology, fees, and processes as set out in the amendments adopted.
Do I have a motion? Do I have a second? I have a second. All in favor, say aye.
I have a discussion.
Oh, wait, got a question?
I have a discussion on subchapter F.
Okay.
Mr. Harbuck, and also, both of y'all come up here for just a minute. I have a question. When I read through this, I hear the concern that's raised about leaving correspondence alone, and I think your statement was leaving it as it is. I think your statement was a statement that made me feel like it's being impaled. I don't see that happening here. I'd like for you to point out why you specifically feel that. When I look at Chapter 5, Section 4 here, I see the accreditation, but I just want to get it on the record. What are you specifically seeing that is the problem? Y'all are in the same position, so go ahead.
Go ahead. Okay.
No, they're not in opposition.
Basically, what we said was, keep it as it is right now until you get the recommendations back, and if that's the time you get those recommendations back, relook at that to figure out what it is that you're going to do at that point in time. But currently it is just leave it as it is and go forward until we get the recommendations back.
Okay, so that's
of course, ditto there, although I was just more specific about the university issue. Those state statutes, which, by the way, in my email are outlined, and you have a reference for them in my email. I apologize it didn't get here. It's on your computer if you have your computer available to you, or on your phone. I apologize for not having that readily available. But they, as I say, these are, I think, important issues. We would just ask the commission to consider these. As I mentioned specifically, that changes to these same two statutes were considered in a past legislative session for the same reason, to place regulation on universities and colleges through TREC, and the legislature turned it down at that time. I think the implication there is that if we're going to do that now, just as I attempted in before, go to the legislature to do that before you enact these rules that are based on that. And then, of course, I also agree with the waiting for ESAC to come back with their recommendations as well, and that's why another reason why we might recommend postponement.
But as I've read through the material previously and today, I look at page 4 of 14, 148 in our handbook. I understand the accreditation issue, or the aligning with, which I don't think is a big problem. And then page 154, or page 10 of 14 of that F, at the very bottom, number 2, alternative delivery and correspondence, is very clearly set out there. So when I see it, and or shall or but, right? We know that's where the law differs. So I don't see a and or a shall or but. I see it and correspondence. So to me, I don't see it going away in any way, shape, or form. So I don't even understand the reason for waiting for ESAC. I understand our motion, but
If I can respond. if
I'm
that's okay.
asking for a response.
TREC-approved correspondence courses can only be handled through a university affiliation. And so when you affect a university and how it sets up its correspondence courses, you're affecting correspondence courses. So that's why when you step in to regulate the universities, it's going to impinge on. It slows down the process at best. At worst, you may even see some of the universities say, "Oh, this is too much trouble to deal with all these regulations. We're just going to drop all the correspondence courses." I could see that happening because even some of those that are involved in this process are aware that the universities now are just now getting around to looking at these rules by their legal staff, and yet it's already at the point where it could even be a final rule today. You see?
Okay. All right.
So it's a slower process for them.
All right.
Thank you, sir.
Are there any other questions about 14? We have a motion and a second. All in favor say aye. Aye. And opposed, no. Motion carries. Agenda item 15. Are you still on, Ms. Lewis?
I think I am.
Okay.
Let me see what it is.
And I have a speaker also.
He didn't make that point.
He's going to say the same thing.
Okay. All right, agenda item 15 is discussion and possible action to adopt amendments to 22 TAC Chapter 537, including 537.11, use of standard contract forms, and then Section 537.51, standard contract form, TREC number 44-1, addendum for reservation of oil and gas or other minerals, which is adopted by reference in that rule. One comment from Trade Association was received that requested that the strike-through capabilities be retained but limited to verified use only by the client of the license holder. Staff agrees with this comment and provided a program allowing this activity will be pre-approved by the Commission to ensure that it could provide such limitations and verifications. Staff also recommends combining and revising the text in Section 537.1104C and D to reflect that with the addition of scalable blanks, the number of pages and placement of the text on the page does not have to be identical to the promulgated form. The proposed revisions to the text as published is highlighted in green. I will point out one additional change. If you look on page 256 of 356, one additional change that was suggested that staff agrees with, and that is in the green writing where it talks about the strike-through program language. Under subsection 1, it says limited to use only by a principal of the license holder, and that would probably be better to say limited to the use only by a principal to a transaction.
Okay.
So that's the additional language change that I would recommend with that. The revised addendum for reservation of oil and gas and other minerals had no comments except a comment in support. There was a change made, a typographical change correction made, and that's outlined in green as well. So staff's recommendation would be to adopt the rules as published with changes to the text and form as presented, with the addendum for reservation of oil and gas and other minerals form being adopted for voluntary use until March 1st, 2015, at which time it shall become mandatory.
Madam Chairman?
Yes, I'm going to get a motion in a second and then seek comments. Commissioner Justice?
I move that staff is authorized on behalf of this commission to submit for adoption amendments to 22 TAC Chapter 537 as previously published in the Texas Register with changes to the text and form adopted by reference as presented, along with any technical or non-substantive changes required for adoption. The revised addendum for reservation of oil, gas, and other minerals, which is adopted by reference in 537.51, is adopted for voluntary use until March 1st, 2015, at which time its use will become mandatory.
Have a motion and a second. Mr. Hatfield?
Thank you, Ms. Chair. I'm still Dan Hatfield. I'm still chairman of the board of the Texas Association of Realtors. And I suppose you think I'm going to talk about the mineral addendum. I'm not. So, as chairman of the board, the association basically supports the proposed rule as amended by staff and presented here today regarding principal's ability to strike through language on a promulgated form. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Mr. Hatfield, before you leave the mic, I would just like to go on record as saying that I had the opportunity to visit with the software provider that the Texas Association of Realtors has a contract with, and I'm concerned about the length of time and the clicks that it takes for a licensee to see the changes that a client could make. And I am very concerned about licensees who continue to misuse that and perhaps don't take the time to open up what has been sent back to them, to review it, to make sure nothing has been changed. And I hope that the trade association will take a very active role in writing articles, admonishing and helping people to remember to open up a contract when they get it back from a client, to open up a contract when they get it back from the other agent and read every page of it again, as those of us who are fossils had to actually read the paper, that they will read the electronics, because I'm concerned about the easy button here as well.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I appreciate that, and I guarantee you that the Texas Association of Realtors has a number of avenues in which to be able to educate our membership through our magazine, through blogs, et cetera, and we will take that into consideration and make sure we have plenty of information and education out there for our membership.
Thank you, Mr. Hatfield. Are there other comments? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, no. Motion carries. Agenda item 16.
Agenda item 16 is discussion and possible action to adopt amendments to 22 TAC Chapter 539, Provisions of the Residential Service Company Act. No comments were received on these amendments as proposed. However, after additional study, staff recommends a couple of changes. Section 539.16 be revised to correct the impractical standard that currently exists for the delivery of evidence of coverage to consumers that was brought to staff's attention by a residential service company. And so that's just a change to make it actually a functional requirement. And it's not more onerous on the RSCs. In fact, they want it. The other change is in regards to the mid-year reports that were published, and that is on page, let's get to it, 285 of 356. Staff is recommending that the question 3A be deleted from this form before we adopt this new form, and that is because it's there is some difficulty in keeping that information confidential under the Public Information Act. It's confidential under the annual report, but not under the mid-year report, and so the staff has determined that they get plenty of information from just 3B, and they do not need to ask for 3A.
So that's, for whomever might make the motion, this would be a staff recommendation today, right?
Right, and I think they could just say as presented by staff, and they're fine. Staff also recommends that Section 539.81 regarding the funded reserve not be adopted today, but be republished with additional substantive changes regarding the use of admitted insurers, and it is on the agenda later in your meeting today.
Item 20.
So again, staff would recommend adopting the amendments as published with the changes to the text as presented by staff today, except for section 539.81, which will be reproposed later in the meeting.
Okay. Who's up for this? Commissioner?
Madam Chair.
Okay.
I move that staff is authorized on behalf of the commission to submit for adoption amendments to 22 TAC Chapter 539 as previously published in the Texas Register with changes to the text as presented along with any technical or non-substantive changes required for adoption except for amendments to subsection 539.81 which are not adopted with changes as reported by staff. Thank you.
There's a motion. I have a second. I have no commenters. Any questions by the commission? All in favor say aye. Aye. And opposed, no. Motion carries. Agenda item 17.
Discussion and possible action to adopt amendments to 22 TAC Chapter 543, rules relating to the provisions of the Texas Timeshare Act. We received no comments on the amendments as proposed, and staff's recommendation would be to adopt the rules as published.
Commissioner Hensley?
Madam Chair, I'd like to make a move that staff is authorized on behalf of this commission to submit for adoption amendments to 22 TAC 543, rules relating to the provisions of the Texas Timeshare Act in the form adopted by reference without changes to the text as previously published in the Texas Register, except for any technical or non-substantive changes required for adoption.
I have a motion. Do I have a second?
Second.
I have no presenters. Do I have any questions by the commission? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, no. Agenda item 18.
Okay, now
Rules
we're...
for possible proposal, right?
Right, we are on to our proposed amendments. Again, all these proposed amendments would go through the regular rulemaking process of being published in the Register, available for public comment, and then being brought back to the commission. Agenda item 18, discussion and possible action to propose amendments to section 535.53, business entity and designated broker. The proposed amendments to this section clarifies the requirements necessary to apply for a business entity broker's license and adds language regarding what is required to meet the in good standing standard that is set out in section 1101.355 of the Texas Occupations Code. And if you look in your materials, the new language is in green. However, this is all a new proposal. So the green, red, and blue would all go forward to the new proposal.
Looking for a motion from the sidebar.
Madam Chairman, move that staff is authorized on behalf of the commission to submit the proposed amendments to 535.53 business entity designated brokers presented along with any technical or non-substantive changes required for proposal to the Texas Register for publication and public comment.
I have a motion. Do I have a second?
Second.
I have no presenters requesting the opportunity. Do I have any questions? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, no. Motion carries. Agenda item 19.
Discussion and possible action to propose a revocation of section 535.81 real estate recovery trust account. As mentioned earlier, staff recommends a repeal of this section since it's inconsistent with the commission's interpretation of section 1101.603 of the Texas Occupation Code and the amended fee schedule adopted by the commission at this meeting.
Commissioner Turner?
Madam Chair, I move that staff is authorized on behalf of this commission to submit the proposed revocation of section 535.81 real estate recovery trust account as presented, along with any technical or non-substantive changes required for revocation to the Texas Register for publication and public comment.
I have a motion. Do I have a second?
Second.
I have no presenters. Any questions? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, no. Motion carries. Carrie, I do have someone who wishes to speak on this item.
Okay. Discussion and possible action to propose the amendments to section 539.81 funded reserves. The proposed amendments to this section clarifies what the commission considers an acceptable admitted insurer that a residential insurance company can use to cover the liability remaining under the outstanding residential service contracts written in Texas in lieu of maintaining a funded reserve. This amendment will enable the Commission to ensure that consumers of residential service contracts have adequate protection as new insurance products become available to residential service companies. One such insurance product was recently or last session adopted, and it's a captive insurance product, and we have been approached by a residential service company to approve that, and so we want to have a rule that sets out the criteria and the standards.
Okay. Commissioner Martinez, you want to make a motion?
Did I hear you say there was a speaker on this one?
Yeah, but we're going to make a motion in a second, then we're going to have a speaker.
I'd like to move that staff is authorized on behalf of this commission to submit the proposed amendments to 539.81 funded reserves as presented, along with any technical or non-substantive changes required for proposal to the Texas Register for publication and public comment.
I have a motion. Do I have a second? Second. I have a second? I did. Got it. Commissioner Justice. Mr. Gillum, thank you for your patience. You've been here a long time.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Good afternoon. My name is John Gillum, and I'm an attorney with Lock Lord LLP here in Austin. And I represent American Home Shield of Texas, which holds a residential service company license from TREC and is also the largest residential service contract company in Texas. I'm here today to briefly comment on the proposed amendment to Rule 539.81 concerning reinsurance through an admitted insurer in lieu of a residential service contract company maintaining a funded reserve. American Home Shield of Texas very much appreciates the time and the effort that the Commission staff have put into preparing the draft rule. In particular, I know that Ms. Lewis and Mr. Moore and Mr. Slagle and Administrator Olmixon have spent a lot of time thinking about this issue, and we really appreciate that. And we appreciate the opportunity to present our concerns today before the Commission as well. The reason that the proposed rule has been placed on the agenda is that last session, as Ms. Lewis indicated, the Texas Legislature passed Chapter 964 of the Texas Insurance Code, which permits a different type of insurance company to be formed and licensed by the Texas Department of Insurance. And that type, as Ms. Lewis noted, is a captive insurance company, and it's a type that's been recognized and approved in several other states over the past 2 decades. And in light of this new insurance law, American Home Shield and its parent company are in the process of forming a Texas captive insurance company for purposes of reinsuring American Home Shield's residential service contracts in Texas and eventually eliminating American Home Shield's funded reserve as permitted under Texas Occupations Code Section 1303.152C. And American Home Shield is still in the midst of that process, and we have met and conferred with both TDI staff and TREC staff during this process on multiple occasions. But because the Texas Department of Insurance actively regulates insurance companies that are admitted to do business in Texas, and because TREC statute on funded reserves was not amended by the legislature, American Home Shield of Texas does not consider a new TREC administrative rule that defines the phrase admitted insurer to be necessary or proper on this particular subject. However, assuming that the Commission would like to move forward with the rule proposal, we have been in touch with the Commission staff about ideas for helping to ensure that the proposed rule is workable if adopted. In particular, American Home Shield believes that additional rule language should be added to provide more concrete, objective, and predictable criteria for approval of admitted insurers. And we believe that additional language should be added to clarify the timeframes and remedies for addressing any revocation of approval that the Commission may undertake pursuant to the proposed rule. We recognize that today's Commission meeting is only the first formal step in the rule adoption process, and we look forward to continuing to work with the Commission and its staff to address our concerns during this process. Thank you.
Wow.
Who is the parent company
Yes,
for American Home Shield of Texas?
It's Service Master.
Are there other questions of the presenter? Thank you, Mr. Gill.
Thank you.
Any other discussion? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, no. Motion carries. Agenda item 21.
Kristen, do you want to present this one?
Oh, yay, a new presenter.
Madam Chair and Commission members, Agenda Item 21 is discussion and possible action to propose amendments to Section 535.212, Education and Experience Requirements for a License. This rule relates to the inspectors, and the proposed amendments revise options through which an applicant may satisfy the fieldwork component of the substitute experience requirement. The proposed amendments also define the term interactive experience training module, increase the methods of delivery to satisfy each training option, and reduce the required hours under one option to lower costs and promote hands-on training. The proposed amendments also extend the deadline that eliminates one option to allow course providers more time to develop courses for the other two options.
Okay, I have no speaker. Do I have a motion?
Madam Chairman,
Mr. Justice?
I move that staff is authorized on behalf of this commission to submit the proposed amendments to 535.212, education and experience requirements for a license as presented, along with any technical or non-substantive changes required for proposal, to the Texas Register for publication and public comment.
I have a motion. Do I have a second? Do I have a comment?
I do.
Mr. Martinez?
Please let me know if my memory fails me, but did we not discuss previously interactive experience as it related to not only inspectors but all of our license holders? We talked previously about an inspector in El Paso being driven by a person in Beaumont, being told what to do via remote video cam, head cam type things. And I remember specifically one of the speakers that came up here said that a situation where this might be used is a situation where an attic only had room for one individual. I remember specifically asking that person, well, what if the trainee doesn't realize they're standing in a pool of gas? So I don't know why this is coming up again after we shut it down previously, so please educate me, someone.
Who's got that?
Well, this proposed rule is simply to allow inspectors to complete the fieldwork component, and it just allows various course delivery methods, and the inspector committee considered these course delivery methods and wanted to be specific in what is defined with interactive experience training module. So to address your question, the rule requires these modules to provide regular and substantive interaction between the students and the instructor, both synchronously or asynchronously, regardless of the means by which the course is delivered.
Sure. Yeah, it's not your fault that we're talking about it, but it is a slippery slope that puts us right back where we said as a commission we didn't want to be. And, you know, I see you'd like to say something. Please jump in.
Well, I just want to clarify something, too, of what was done here. It's a refinement of the rule that was adopted. I know this rule's been adopted, what, 3 times now?
Sure.
But, and if you look at it, it actually addresses your concern because under option number 2, which had the whole webinar scenario with the remote learning, that was actually changed to require fieldwork through the ride-along, the actual participatory fieldwork. It's fewer hours than in option number 1, which is 40 hours, but both of them also contain a component of interactive experience module, which they've always had, but it wasn't well defined. And so what they did is they required specific fieldwork for both options that are going to continue in the long term, and defined what interactive experience modules would be, and that could include the webinar situation as well as some of these others listed. And then, of course, the third option is one that will eventually go away, but the inspector committee recommended extending it for some more time to allow for more development of the type of interactive experience training modules that we've had through no fault of the current committees on this.
the types, and current staff actually, the type of courses that had been approved as interactive experience modules weren't truly interactive. And so this is actually putting a higher standard on those courses.
So I think I heard you say that interactive is not truly interactive.
Courses have been approved for interactive that, under this new definition that they have here, wouldn't qualify. And that term had never been defined in the rules before, so there wasn't clear guidance. This is trying to give clear guidance so that doesn't happen.
Commissioner Martinez, I think part of what you're remembering is some question about what the bill author at the Capitol had in mind. And Commissioner Jones and I met with him and got a clearer understanding of his expectation of our rule process and the hours of hands-on, 16, this is the way I read it in layman's terms, 16 hours of hands-on is to satisfy that part of the discussion, and then the additional, which can be done in alternate delivery, if you will, interactive, with a specifics on what interactive looks like, is I think what we're doing is, am I incorrect?
And the distinction is, remember, for the substitute experience, regular coursework, class coursework, is already a component. That's Part A. Part B is supposed to be the field work. So we have hands-on plus the other education that's not hands-on should be interactive, because what they're doing is learning how to be a home inspector by practical application, not by course book.
Mm-hmm. And we also heard testimony about the individuals saying that, they lived in Kermit, Texas, and there was a hard time getting a qualified person to do the ride along, and it was costing them an egregious amount of money. So I remember that part of the conversation, and we had a conference call with the legislator. But I still think that we're in a slippery slope situation. I don't know that it's defined enough. I know that we're fleshing out what interactive means. I'm still concerned that we don't want, that new person put in a situation that's unsafe because of somebody misinterpreting what we're recommending. So I think we're going to need to go above and beyond if this passes, which I'm fine if it does, but I do think we need to go above and beyond in specifying.
And of course, we're just putting it out
Right.
there.
I know.
And I can't imagine that we put this out here without any comments from the inspector community.
It's always hard to get the bullet. It's always hard to get the horse back in the barn.
I expect a plethora of information to come our way. Hopefully timely.
The definition for the interactive experience training module came from the Department of Education, and the department's definition of correspondence courses and the delivery methods required by the U.S. Department of Education for interactive courses. And also, just to be clear, that the first two options still require hands-on training, and the third option will go away eventually.
And not being a lawyer, but reading it and saying that the classroom, as it says in Section A, a person to students in the classroom, we can define where the classroom is and where it is not as being the teacher. So, there's all kinds of ways to reinterpret what we've put down here, and I certainly wouldn't put very much stock in the Department of Education, for the record. I call for the question.
Okay, thank you. I believe we already have a motion and a second. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
And opposed, no. Motion carries. Lost my place. 22.
Discussion and possible action to close the review of chapters 22 TAC chapters 537, 539, and 543. Staff has completed the review of these chapters and actually all of our chapters for quadrennial rule review. So we would recommend closing the review of the rules as presented.
Mr. Commissioner Jones.
Madam Chairman, move that the staff is authorized on behalf of this commission to close the rule review of 22 TAC Chapter 537 Professional Agreements and Standard Contracts, Chapter 539 provision of the Residential Service Company Act and Chapter 543, rules relating to the provision of the Texas Timeshare Act.
Second.
I have a motion and several seconds. Are there any comments from commissioners or questions? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
And opposed, no. Motion carries. Agenda item 23.
This was an item brought to the agenda by a request from a commission member at the last meeting. It's discussion and possible action regarding possibility of continuing education credit rollover to subsequent renewal periods. I believe this was based on a public comment that was received at the last meeting. So it really is an item for discussion. I will, for y'all, I will note that the Broker Responsibility Working Group did consider this, and they did not want to make any recommendations on it. They thought that it would be impractical and not necessarily a good idea to have that continuing rollover. I believe their reasons were, first of all, of the 15 hours, if you're a broker, 12 of those hours are already spoken for with broker responsibility, legal ethics, legal and ethics. And so if you allow rollover, you've got 3 hours. Let's say you take one of the professional designation courses and it's a 30-hour course. Does that mean you take no other continuing education for the next 10 years? They didn't think that was a good idea because they want people to stay current. Other than that, I think from a staff perspective, it would be a major undertaking to design and implement an IT program to do that. And so if that was something the commission wanted to do, you'd have to allow plenty of time for us to develop that.
Madam Chair?
Yes, sir.
I recommend we refer this back to the Education Committee to review it.
Is that appropriate?
That's fine.
Okay.
They've had their plate full lately, so they hadn't looked at this issue yet, but we can add it to their list.
Okay.
Here, here.
That's fine. Cool. Yes, sir.
I might suggest to the Education Committee or whomever's lucky lap this ends up in that possibly they look to the State Bar for guidance on how to implement rollover procedures of continuing education because they do allow a certain number of hours to roll over. And in effect, it is a reward for those that are potentially getting credit for teaching or for going above and beyond in their education requirements. And so it helps those people who are doing more than they're typically asked to do. And you could put a cap on how many hours could roll over every year. This might also be something that we want to take a serious look at if given some of the considerations we discussed yesterday with regard to potential changes to continuing ed requirements for licensees that could help ease or soften those sorts of changes if we end up seeing those come around.
Awesome. Thank you. We covered agenda item 24 this morning earlier. So 25.
Gwen is not here, so I'll do this one.
Okay.
Discussion and possible action to approve changes to TREC form regarding course and instructor evaluation. The Education Standards Advisory Committee recommends that the revised form be used for course and instructor evaluation. It was revised to be a more meaningful review and applicable to the various delivery methods, and staff would recommend that you approve the form as presented.
Madam Chair?
Yes, sir.
I move that the commission approve changes to the TREC form EDCI-1 course and instructor evaluation form is presented along with any technical and non-substantive changes.
A motion to have a second.
Second.
Any questions, comments? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, no. Motion carries. I think we talked about this yesterday. Anybody think of anything they didn't mention yesterday?
Yes.
Okay.
That Mr. Olmixon congratulate the building administrator for cost-saving measures to keep electricity down and keep this room temperature at 50 degrees.
Yeah. Thank you, Mr. Arriaga. I was going to ask him to spend some money on blankets, and so I guess we won't.
Madam Chair. But before we adjourn, I mentioned this to Mr. Olmixon personally, but flipping past the agenda item on the audit, which we had moved up previously, reminded me I would like to commend Mr. Olmixon and their staff and our staff for their extremely fast response
and adept response to what we receive from the State Office of Auditing. And I want to do that publicly on the record. I was pleased. I thought you did a good job addressing it. And I'm satisfied that these issues are not going to come up again, and that they were an anomaly probably tied to our shift from being a typical state agency to SDSI. And thank you again, Mr. Olmec and staff, for addressing that quickly and thoroughly.
Thank you, Commissioner Turner, and I believe you speak for the entire commission. Looks like our next meeting is scheduled for February the 9th, 2015. Will that be at 9 or 10 o'clock in the morning? 10 o'clock in the morning. 10 o'clock in the morning. Okay. Is there any other? Do we want to talk about the next one?
Madam Chairman, I have one remaining item.
Okay, just a minute. We're going to talk about the next one, and then we'll come to you.
Okay.
So is May the next time we meet?
May.
What are those blue things on the calendar that you gave us?
That is, that's UT graduation weekend. So we probably want to stay away from May the 22nd, 23rd, that weekend.
Okay.
Need to check on the NAR meetings.
I'm getting ready to do that.
Then I have ICSC meeting in the afternoon.
I don't have that in my calendar. NAR is the 11th through the 17th.
Cancel May.
So we'd have to go early,
Yes.
like the 4th.
Early is better.
The 4th?
Yes.
Any of staff? The 4th?
I'll be back.
After these messages, or what?
I'm out through the 3rd.
Oh,
but
okay.
I'll be back.
Okay. Thank you, Arnold. Oh, and we'll say, may the 4th be with you? Yeah. I'm sorry.
I got one more thing.
Okay, Commissioner Turner and then Commissioner Martinez.
I doubt very seriously, a few of us talked about this yesterday, but I doubt very seriously that our brand new gubernatorial administration's list of things to do immediately upon entering office is going to be replacing me. But in the event that it is, and they were to do so timely, my term would expire in January prior to our February meeting. So barring reappointment or inaction by the governor's office, I won't be here. And I wanted to thank you all. I've enjoyed this. I hope I get to do it a little longer. This is a very well-run agency. I've been impressed, and I've enjoyed getting to know you all during this term. So thank you very much. I appreciate it.
We appreciate you.
Maybe I'll see you. I bet I will, but just in case.
Thank you, Mike. Anybody else want to say something? No? No? Mr. Martinez, you had something?
One of the things as we close from a budget chairman update, I would like to ask Commissioner Arriaga if he will co-serve with Commissioner Alley on the strategic building plan that we talked about at our last meeting, and I'd like Director Oldmixon to include him on any communication with Mr. Alley on that so that they can work on that as expeditiously as possible. Will you accept?
Yes, sir.
Okay.
Thank you, Commissioner Martinez. Is there any other matters to be brought before this commission? Wow, meeting adjourned 12:25.
35 minutes in.